Hasta la vista, baby. Russians are turning against their own comrades, and the excruciating losses are up 90%. At the same time, Ukrainians move deeper into Kherson region. The hostilities in Adviivka decreased significantly, and Putin just did a nuclear test. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude, and let's get straight to the point and talk about some ridiculous Russian propaganda. Oh, wow! So yes, we have one of politicians in Russia whose name is Dmitry Frolov. Obviously, he is from the political party called Russia United, and he suggested a pretty interesting idea. He said, let's put all the alcoholics and all the problematic people, let's put them as soldiers in Ukraine. And my question is, so do you think the morale and obedience of existing Russian soldiers, do you think it is already on the extremely high levels? Imagine what will happen when you put these rascals. According to Dmitry Frolov, this is actually a good idea, because this will help those people to get rid of their bad habits, and also most likely to get rid of their lives. So for the Russian society, according to him, even though he did not mention this, this is a win-win scenario. In my personal opinion, this could be a very bad idea to give a weapon to an alcoholic. I mean, who knows what can happen, right? But what do I know? So for this reason, please you guys let me know in the comments whether you support the idea of Dmitry Frolov or obviously not. But okay, now let's get back to some serious things, and first of all talk about Putin testing nuclear weapons. Then we'll go to the south of Ukraine, where Ukrainians started to penetrate a deeper Kherson region. Then we'll move to the east of the country, where the losses of Russians are up 90%. And we will finalize everything with Russians turning against their own comrades. And so yes, first of all, under the command of President of Russia Vladimir Putin, the Minister of Defense of Russia Sergei Shoigu, he performed recently a nuclear test. And in this so-called practice, a missile launcher, a nuclear submarine, and 2 missile carriers will be involved. And obviously, according to Sergei Shoigu, the reason for these exercises is to plan how to repel an enemy nuclear attack against Russia. I don't know in which parallel multi-universe they're living, trying to repel attacks against Russia. I mean, who do you guys think in the world, which country in the world is threatening Russia with nukes right now, as we speak? I think the answer will be very complicated to find, because I mean, I don't think any countries care about nuking Russia at this point, right? But for some reason, Russia always finds some enemies outside. But so yeah, later on the Ministry of Defense of Russia released us this video, which shows the preparations and the actual launch of so-called nuke called Yars. And then even this video by regular civilians in Arkhangelsk showing this missile passing by. Well, there goes another promise of Russians that they will not be doing a nuclear tests until America does it. But it's not like that. Russian officials ever lied to us, right? But okay, now let's switch our attention to Ukraine, because recently Azov soldiers performed even more training of crossing the water obstacles, such as for example river, as you can see from this picture. Which is a very good sign and very convenient timing, is that even though Ukrainians do not yet officially announce any operations in Kherson region, though they already started slowly crossing it, but because of the increase in this type of exercises recently, we can already kinda assume where the next major attack of Ukrainians will happen. And ultimately it is not just about the water. Ukrainian pilots also started their first lessons how to pilot F-16 fighter jets in America, in the state of Arizona. And so yes, now let's briefly talk about the situation in the south of Ukraine, where Ukrainians penetrated deeper inside Kherson region, and then we'll switch our attention to the east. And first of all, guys, if you don't mind, can you please help me? All you need to do is to simply like this video and subscribe to my channel if you like this style of daily updating, because it absolutely creates a massive support for my work. So thank you so much. You can also follow me on Instagram to see how I live outside of YouTube. The link is down below. But before we talk about the situation in the south, allow me an extremely quick stop in Slavuta, located in Khmelnytsky region, because recently Russian allegedly drones were intercepted by Ukrainians and the debris damaged the civilian infrastructure. And according to the Ukrainian intelligence, the target of this Russian attack was the local power station. And just like yesterday, Ukrainians were able to intercept all Russian Shahed drones, and this last day it was a total of 11 of them. But as we go back to the south of Ukraine, Ukrainians once again using extremely inexpensive $400 drones were able to destroy an estimatedly $25 million worth of Russian military equipment, which included missile launchers, heavy flamethrowers and radars. And besides that, a pretty big artillery firing position of Russians has been destroyed by Ukrainians using HIMARS, located to the east of Tokmak. But the main activities in the south are obviously happening in Dnipro River, next to Kherson region, and reportedly, Ukrainians were able to destroy a small reconnaissance and intelligence group of Russians trying to force the river on boat next to Dnipryany. And even the British intelligence report confirms that yes, these cross-river raids by Ukrainians are happening and they are pretty successful. A lot of Ukrainians were already able to cross Dnipro River and gain the foothold, and one of the main reasons why Russians are not able to repel these attacks, if you remember from the last several months, it is because they were withdrawing troops from Kherson region and relocating them to much more desirable locations, such as for example Zaporozhye and obviously the east of Ukraine. And already at that time on this channel we guys were talking about that eventually when Ukrainians would want to launch the attacks against across Dnipro River, there will be not that many Russians to protect against these raids. This is exactly what is happening right now. But another important thing, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, even though it is not yet confirmed by this map, is that Ukrainians were able to establish the control of this first, very important highway located between Poima, Kozachye Lageri and Krynki, as you can see, which is represented here by this yellow line. And even though this road might not yet look like anything extraordinary, which I here highlighted in blue, but don't forget that it also goes through another major settlement, pretty much the very first fortress on the left side of Kherson, city called Oleshki, and then goes all the way down to another important city, Hola Pristan. And these both cities, they have this highway continuing to the south all the way to Skadovsk and another one to Brylivka, which pretty much, as you can see, it might only start with this one simple road, but it will allow Ukrainians to expand their further liberation in the future, because obviously heavy machinery, as soon as Ukrainians will be able to cross it as well, will require some kind of roads. As for now, the attacks of Ukrainians in the south are only gaining the momentum. That is why we might see some pretty big moves in this region in the near future, so stay tuned. Right, now let's briefly switch our attention to the east of Ukraine and then talk about some massive losses of Russians, which are up estimatedly 90%, and we'll finalize everything with Russians turning against their own comrades. And first of all, as we refer to the same report by the Institute for the Study of War, there was no mentions about combat activities next to Kupiansk-Svatovo-Kreminna front line, but Ukrainians were predominantly successful to the south of Bakhmut, while Russians were mainly concentrating their attacks to the northwest and northeast of Adviivka. And speaking about Adviivka, the tactics of Russians remain the same, which is pretty much sending even more troops with now even less protection and less support from artillery and military vehicles, and trying to advance in like several meters at a cost of hundreds and thousands of lives. And in addition to that, Ukrainians were able to destroy a relatively big self-propelled artillery firing position of Russians located in Novoselivka-Druha. And unfortunately, as mentioned previously, even though Russians are suffering significant losses in this area, they are advancing a little bit. Yes, that's pretty much exactly how much they were able to advance in the last 48 hours, which is not justified by the number of losses you're gonna hear soon. But another interesting thing is that according to the locals and the residents of neighboring settlements, the combat activities coming from Avdiivka reduced significantly, at least in half, by 50%. And most likely the reason for this, as mentioned previously, it is because Russians do not longer use that many military vehicles and artillery support whenever they try to advance. That is why these combat activities, once again, supposed to be pretty fast. As soon as Ukrainians discover an advancing group of Russians, they eliminate them, and then there is pretty much a moment of silence. And Ukrainians, on the other hand, knowing the love of the Russian officials and Putin himself for symbolism, decided to destroy previously installed Russian flag in Avdiivka Hill, which Russians claim to capture already 3 times. And looks like that right now there are no Russian soldiers anymore, the flag is destroyed, so looks like that the hill is once again contested. But it is not just Avdiivka. A little bit to the south, already getting closer to Donetsk city, Russians were also completely obliterated, trying to advance in their infantry fighting vehicles. And according to already familiar Ukrainian soldier nicknamed Madar, he released this video, which is 10 plus minutes long, of the compilation of Ukrainians destroying armored military vehicles of Russians, mainly in the east. I'm only questioning here one thing. How long it took him to make this compilation? How long it took for these vehicles to be destroyed? With the number of combat activities happening in the last couple of weeks, I will not be surprised if it only took several days. And by the way, if you want to see this entire 10 minutes video compilation, which is obviously fully uncensored, you can go ahead and check it on my Patreon. The link is down below and there is 1 week of free access. Thank you so much. And the very first slide shows us that the most significant increase in Russian losses is happening for their artillery systems. And pretty much you can confirm it. Almost every single video I make is I'm talking about Ukrainians destroying yet another location of Russian artillery. But it does not end here, because the total number of Russian losses in terms of people is getting close to 300,000. Russians also lost more than 5,000 tanks and almost 10,000 armored personnel carriers, in addition to 300 helicopters and aircrafts each. And in these next 3 slides, you will be also able to see how these losses were increasing in comparison to the previous month, which pretty much allows you to assume, and not even assume, this is already confirmed as a fact, that right now the losses of Russians are so significant, it was only equal to the beginning of war, which shows you how much effort Russians are spending right now as we speak, trying to capture Avdiivka, even though the advancement is absolutely insignificant. And at this very moment, according to the general of Ukrainian army Alexander Syrsky, on average, in Avdiivka alone, Russians lose 300 soldiers every single day. And even the British intelligence was also able to confirm the same fact, that the number of Russian losses on average skyrocketed by 90%, also mainly as a result of Avdiivka combat activities. But wait, there is, as always, more. Besides excruciating losses, a lot of Russian soldiers, they also start to turn against their own comrades. And obviously you already know about the opposition groups, such as for example the Freedom of Russia Legion, Russian Volunteer Corps, and just the regular Russians who use I want to leave hotline to surrender to Ukrainians and just hide while hostilities are still ongoing. We also have a lot of Russian soldiers who just voluntarily surrender arms and even potentially join the ranks of Ukrainians to fight against the army of Putin. And recently, another anti-Putin battalion called Siberia was created. They do not take captured Russian soldiers to join their rank, and it mainly consists of the Russian minorities from different regions which Putin couldn't care less. And one of the goals of them fighting in this war is to obviously help Ukraine win, and then hopefully as a result of Ukrainians winning, maybe, hopefully according to them, they can achieve the independence from Russia itself. So at this point, there is simply no denying the fact that anti-Putin movement is gaining the momentum. But as for now, it is mainly happening on the battlefields in Ukraine, so let's wait and see if and when this will start happening on the territory of Russia itself. So let's wait and see. Unfortunately, at this moment, there is no one single opposition person in Russia who can unite people, but I mean, you never know. Such people always come as a surprise. I mean, if we already knew about such guy or girl, the FSB would have already arrested them. So let's see. But no matter what happens, I'll make sure to be always here, reporting to you the freshest news possible. And if you like this style of content, can you please subscribe to my channel? It only takes one click. Thank you so much, my patrons, for your support, and see you tomorrow.